Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
Happy New Year, and what a pleasant surprise to see you in the chair there. Mr Speaker, the National Government has got off to a fantastic start to the year. First day of Parliament today, and already look what we've had. A decisive cabinet reshuffle, Mr Speaker, reform of the warrant of fitness system, Mr Speaker, saving New Zealanders $159 million a year. Major announcements on irrigation last week, $400 million going into that. $80 million to set the scheme up, and, Mr Speaker, 14,000 new apprentices. So the point of this, Mr Speaker, is if you were listening to the two leaders of the National Party and the Leader of the Opposition today, you would see there were two very competing narratives there. And you would see, Mr Speaker, that on this side of the House, the Prime Minister was very clearly laying out his plan to continue the work of the National Government, the work that we started 4 years ago and that we are going to continue down the track with. And it's very clearly focused, Mr Speaker. It's about sensible financial management. It's about building the economy of New Zealand. It's about rebuilding Christchurch. And it's about providing better public services. And, Mr Speaker, there is a very concrete plan in all those four areas. Take that in contrast to David Shearer this afternoon, who was he was saying he's going to make the tough decisions. He said it twice, actually, and then he said he was going to make strong decisions. Well, the first big challenge he's got is clearing out the shadow cabinet next week, because there is some real culling to be done on that side of the House. And if he can't get rid of some of that Labor Party dead wood, it shows that he doesn't have the steel to face up to the challenges that he says he's going to deliver on as Labor Party leader. And we were sitting there on Sunday watching the news, watching Mr Shearer speaking at Wainuiamata Rugby Club, reading off those order cues. We were expecting some serious policy. And what did he deliver? Absolutely nothing. His answer to the housing crisis is to say that the National Government just needs to roll up its sleeves and build more houses. Well, that's pretty easy to say when you're in opposition. But what the people of New Zealand are looking for is a solid plan to get the economy going. And we have had zero policy from the Labor Party. Meanwhile, over on Planet Green, I don't know if you saw their State of the Planet thing on the news last night. There was more green space there than you'd see, I don't know, in rural New Zealand. Apparently it was in the middle of Mount Eden, but it looked like every attendee had about 2 square kilometres of space all to themselves there. But they're talking about printing money. They're talking about all sorts of bizarre stuff. What we are focused on as a government is things that really matter to New Zealanders. And forefront of those is making sure that the economy is going in the right direction. And that, Mr Speaker, is why National Party members and National Party ministers are very focused on delivering on that economic agenda. So if you look at the reforms we've been progressing as a government, it's all about making the economy grow, making it expand. You've got to also look at the international context. New Zealand, over the next 3 years, is going to have a higher rate of growth than the US, than Canada, than Japan, than the Eurozone. That is pretty hard to beat. And that's after 4 years of very solid economic stewardship in the most difficult economic circumstances seen since World War II and the Depression before it. So when you look at this government's record in that international context, it is very, very clear that we are on the right track. And what's also very clear is that this program resonates with New Zealanders, because they know that in John Key we have got the best Prime Minister that New Zealand ever has had. And they know that we have got the guy who has the knowledge and the decisive leadership to lead us through what has been a very difficult set of circumstances. So if the Labor Party think that by devaluing the New Zealand dollar by 25%, they are going to increase New Zealanders' standard of living, they are just dreaming. There are no easy fixes here. They are talking about a manufacturing crisis. Well, they are just in cuckoo land on that. They don't have answers. What they want to do is interfere in the management of the New Zealand dollar. They want to set the exchange rate, but they won't absolutely commit to that. And I want to hear David Shearer come into this House over the next week or so and tell us what he really really is going to do to bring the dollar down. Because what that will mean higher petrol prices at the pump, it will mean a higher cost of imported goods, and it will actually mean that New Zealanders will be hurting in the pocket. And so I caution those members, they want to think very, very seriously before they make those sorts of promises. Other sorts of promises they've made, things like housing. They're going to build 100,000 houses for $300,000 each. Well, that is impossible. In actual fact, David Shearer is admitting that he can't deliver on that. When he said that initially, people were expecting, 3 to 4 bedroom houses. Yesterday on TV, he's saying, well, actually, no, that's going to cost over $500,000 a house. So he knows that they can't do it. Meanwhile, what are we doing? We're just progressing on with sensible reforms. If you look at infrastructure, broadband, fibre to the home, it's all happening. If you look at what's happening around the hospital building, the Canterbury District Health Board redevelopment, if you look at $12 billion worth of roads over the next 10 years, this is the sort of infrastructure you need to get an economy going. Not you, Mr. Speaker, but one needs. And what I can tell you, if you ever have a government made up of the Greens and the Labour Party, things are going to grind to a halt. Because when Holly Walker and co are in that cabinet, they are going to stop the road building. They don't agree with this stuff. So Labour's hands are going to be totally tied. Then you throw in Honi Harawira, what's going to happen there? So you can see nothing is going to happen if these people were ever given the Treasury benches. Meantime, we are progressing with a program of serious reforms. Now, water, irrigation, absolutely vital to agriculture in this country. You see, we're in drought conditions at the moment. What are we doing about it? We're actually doing something practical that's going to make a difference. $80 million initially, $400 million over the next few years. That is the sort of thing that is going to get the agricultural sector going. It's not going to be continued bleating by the opposition around the price of the New Zealand dollar, because frankly, we can't do anything with a floating exchange rate. By definition, it's floating. The dollar is worth what it's worth. We have to work with it. And you'll see many manufacturers in New Zealand, they know that. At the same time, they've been benefiting from cheaper costs of imported parts to the products they're manufacturing. So there's some pros and cons in that issue of the value of the dollar. But what we've got to develop, Mr. Speaker, in the economy in the long term is a real resilience to ride out those highs and lows. And if you look at it overall, 2 to 3% economic growth over the next few years, we are definitely on the right track. I just want to speak about better public services, Mr. Speaker, because that is one of our top 4 priorities. And it's no secret that the public have not got the best delivered public services over the past 10 years. It's no secret under the Labour government the size of the public service expanded by 50%, but the results weren't any different. So we are taking a very focused approach to that. We've chosen 10 results areas over 5 different sectors. We have put very clear targets there that we expect the public service to meet. But more importantly than that, Mr. Speaker, the public service has to reorganise itself so that it has a configuration that sees those services working properly together to actually deliver results. So we've got to make Wellington relevant in Glenfield, which I represent. We've got to make Wellington relevant in Southland. We've got to make it relevant on the West Coast in Northland, everywhere outside the Beltway, because it just hasn't been so. So in the area where I'm responsible, state services, we are going to make sure that the public service really is delivering for New Zealand. But I just want to reiterate, Mr. Speaker, for the public, if you look at those 2 narratives, the Prime Minister's narrative, very focused on those top 4 priorities, rebuilding Christchurch, sensible management of the finances, growing the economy. We are making sure that we are going to be delivering those better public services as well. David Shearer, he's talking in vague slogans. He tells us he's going to take the tough decisions. You should have seen those. Well, yeah, he doesn't tell us what they are. But you should have seen the faces on his caucus today during that speech, because they've blown their chance to remove Mr. Shearer. They're going to have to vote him back in February. Mr. Cunliffe now says he's not even going to challenge him. I reckon Mr. Shearer is going to be there through to the next election, and he is going to be the albatross around Labour's neck for time to come. So there you have it, Mr. Speaker, very clear choices for the electorate. Sensible economic management, a clear plan from John Key, or vague slogans from David Shearer, the Greens and co. I rest my case.
Honourable Shane Jones.